The night I found out, I was standing in our kitchen at 11:47 p.m., holding Marcus's phone, and my hands were completely still. That's the part one still think about, how still my hands were. Not shaking. Still. Like some part of me had already known, had always known, and was just waiting for the rest of me to catch up. I wasn't supposed to see it. He'd left his phone on the counter when he went to check on our daughter, Lily, who'd woken up crying. The notification was just sitting there. A text from his mother, Patricia. And the preview was enough. 7 words. I won't say them yet, because if I do you won't understand the weight of them, not until you know what the 6 years before that moment looked like. Not until you understand what she built, and how long she spent building it. Marcus and I got married in September of 2016, at a small venue outside Naperville, Illinois called Cress Creek. 53 people. His mother sat in the front row and cried through the whole ceremony. I thought it was love. I thought she was happy. I remember thinking, I am so lucky, this woman actually likes me. Some of my friends had nightmare stories about their in-laws. Patricia brought me flowers the first time we met. Stargazer lilies. She said they were her favorite and she wanted to share them. The first argument Marcus and I ever had, about 8 months in, was about his cousin's wedding. We'd been invited. I'd already told my own mother we were going. Marcus came home one evening in May 2017 and said, quietly, that he thought we should skip it, that he'd spoken to his mom and she felt it might be awkward because of some tension with Marcus's aunt that I apparently hadn't been sensitive enough about at Christmas. I had no idea what he was talking about. I'd barely spoken to his aunt at Christmas. But Marcus had that look on his face, the one I'd learned to dread, the one that meant his mother had already shaped the version of events he was working from. We went to the wedding. But something small and cold settled into the space between us that month, and it never fully left. By 2018 it was becoming a pattern, and I couldn't name it yet. Patricia called Marcus almost every day. Long calls. I could sometimes hear the low rhythm of her voice through his phone when he stood in the hallway. He'd come back into the room quieter. Changed. There was a version of Marcus I got in the mornings, before the calls, and a different version after. I started to notice the difference. I started to track it. I told myself I was being paranoid. In March of 2019, Marcus's sister Diane had a baby, and the whole family descended on her house in Elmhurst for 2 weeks. I couldn't get time off work. I was 3 months into a new job. I'd explained this, and Patricia told Diane, according to what came out much later, that I'd refused to go. That I didn't think it was worth the effort. Diane didn't speak to me properly for almost 1.5 years. I thought it was new baby exhaustion. I brought a gift. I sent a card. I got nothing back. I couldn't understand what I'd done. That's the thing about what Patricia was doing. She never left fingerprints. Every lie was plausible. Every wedge she drove had just enough truth mixed in, a real tension, a real moment, a real misunderstanding, that when Marcus mentioned something, I'd find myself doubting my own memory of events. She was patient. She was methodical. And she loved her son in the particular, suffocating way that some people love things they can't bear to share. By 2021 I had drifted so far from Marcus's family that Diane didn't invite us to her daughter's first birthday. Marcus and I had our worst fight ever that October. I said something felt wrong, that his family was pulling away from me, that I didn't understand why. He said, carefully, that maybe it was because I never really made the effort. That people noticed. That his mother had mentioned more than once that I seemed uncomfortable around them. I sat across from him at our kitchen table and felt something crack open in my chest. Because I had made the effort. I had made so much effort. I had done everything right. And then I found out. 7 words in that notification preview. She's doing it again, just ignore her. I picked up the phone. I scrolled up. And what I found was a thread going back 4 months, Marcus's mother, texting him about me. About things I'd supposedly said. About motives she'd invented and handed to him like fact. There was a message from August where she described a phone call I'd allegedly had with his aunt, a call I had never made. There was one from June where she told him I'd complained about Diane to a mutual friend. I hadn't. I didn't even see that friend in June. There were older messages, too, further up. I kept scrolling, my still hands moving through screen after screen, and the thread went back 2 years on that phone. 2 years of a quiet, constant current of poison. And I knew, standing there, that it hadn't started 2 years ago. It had started at the beginning. I stood in that kitchen until I heard Marcus's footsteps on the stairs. I didn't move. I didn't hide the phone. He stopped when he saw my face. I held the phone out to him and said, "Read it from the top." He didn't take it at first. He looked at it the way you look at something when you already know, somewhere under everything, that it's going to change the shape of your life. Then he took it. And he read. The confrontation didn't happen that night. That night was almost silent. Marcus sat at the kitchen table for a long time. I sat across from him. At some point I made tea that neither of us drank. He said, once, "I don't understand," and I said nothing because there was nothing to say to that. The understanding was all there on the screen, patient and clear. The confrontation happened 3 days later. I had asked Marcus to invite Patricia over. He'd looked at me for a long time when I asked, and then he'd picked up the phone and called her without a word. She arrived on a Thursday afternoon. November 4th, 2021. She was wearing her coat, a beige wool coat she always wore in autumn, and she walked into the kitchen smiling, holding a bag of clementines she'd brought for Lily. She put the bag on the counter. She turned around. She saw our faces. Marcus laid his phone on the kitchen table, screen up, and slid it toward her. The silence that followed was one of the longest I have ever sat inside. She didn't pick up the phone. She looked at it. Then she looked at me. And something moved behind her eyes, not guilt, exactly, not shame, something more calculating than that. She was deciding. What she decided was to go with love. She said she'd done it to protect him. Her actual words, "I have always done what I thought was best for my son." She said she'd had concerns about me since the beginning, real concerns, she said, about whether I was the right person for Marcus, and she'd only ever been trying to make sure he stayed aware. She said it the way people say things when they've rehearsed them. She was crying by the 3rd sentence. Real tears, or good ones. Marcus said, very quietly, "You told me she made a phone call that never happened, Mum." She said she must have been confused. He said, "You told Diane she refused to visit the baby." She said that was a misunderstanding. I said, What about the message in June where you told him I'd been complaining about Diane to Renata? Because I hadn't spoken to Renata since February. Do you want to tell me what that was? And for just 1 second, one single second, the performance slipped. She looked at me with something raw and unguarded, and what I saw there wasn't confusion. It was fury. Pure, cold fury, that I was still there, still speaking, still in her son's kitchen. Then the tears came back, and she said she only ever wanted what was best for her family, and she hoped one day we could understand that. Marcus asked her to leave. She stood at the front door for a moment, Clementina's still on the counter, and she looked at him the way mothers look at children when they want them to feel responsible. He held the door open. She left. We spent 6 months in couples therapy after that. It was not a clean or easy recovery. Marcus had spent years being slowly, gently steered, and some of what she'd planted had taken root in places that didn't come clean easily. There were nights he'd start a sentence and stop himself, because he could hear, for the first time, whose voice it was coming from. That was the hardest part to watch. Not my pain. His. Patricia and I have not spoken since that Thursday. Marcus speaks to her occasionally, she is still his mother. I have made peace with that being something I cannot control. What I have not made peace with is the 6 years. 6 years of sitting across from that woman at Christmas dinners and birthday tables, thinking she was on my side, thinking I just needed to try harder. She used my trying against me. She took the effort I made and turned it into evidence of my motives. She was always one step ahead because she knew I trusted her. And that is the only explanation I have ever needed for why people like her win for so long. They use your trust as the weapon. And they only lose it when you stop giving them more.